Captain Daniel Foster stood in the command center of station and watched the screens. Red light filled the room. Alarms screamed from every corner. The walls shook as another weapon hit the shield. The shield was failing. Everyone knew it. Everyone could see it in the numbers that scrolled across the displays. "Shield strength at 18%, a young officer called out. Her voice was steady, but Foster could hear the fear underneath. Foster could hear it because he felt the same fear. The fleet filled the sky outside the station. It was a sight that made Foster's stomach turn. The ships were huge and black and perfect. They looked like nothing humans could ever build. They had conquered most of the known galaxy. Hundreds of worlds had fallen to them. Thousands of alien species had surrendered because they knew the truth. No one could beat their technology was too advanced. Their weapons were too powerful. Their numbers were too great. But humans had refused to surrender. Not this time, not at station. Foster was 52 years old. His hair was gray. His face was worn from years of command and worry. He had watched his friends die. He had watched his soldiers fight and fall. He had received reports of human colonies being destroyed, of families being erased from existence. They did not see humans as equals. They saw humans as pests. Dr. Lisa Grant entered the command center. She was head of the station's science division. She had been Foster's friend for 20 years. Her face was pale and her eyes were red from not sleeping. "Daniel," she said quietly, "it is time." Foster did not answer. He knew what she meant. He knew what had to happen now. The weapon in the vault below the station had been created by early human colonists. It had been locked away for decades. Foster had seen the records. He knew what it could do. But he had hoped it would never be used. He had hoped that humanity would find another way to survive. "Shield at 12%, the young officer said. Her voice was shaking now. An explosion rocked the entire station. The lights flickered. For a moment, Foster thought the shield had failed completely, but the lights came back on. 11%, the officer whispered. Foster turned to look at Dr. Grant. She was looking at him with an expression he could not read. "If we use it," Foster said, "there is no taking it back." "If we do not use it," Dr. Grant replied, "there is no future for us." Foster knew she was right. He had been running the numbers in his head for days. Even if they held the shield for another hour, they would eventually break through. They had the numbers, they had the firepower, they had the patience. The station could not hold forever. Maybe a few thousand humans would survive if they evacuated, but they would be refugees running across the galaxy with nowhere to hide. They would hunt them down. It was only a matter of time. Foster looked at the screens again. The fleet was still there, still firing, still closing in. He thought about the families living in the lower sections of the station. He thought about the children. There were 273 children on station. He had seen the list. Their average age was 8 years old. What kind of future did they have if he did nothing? "Get me to the vault," Foster said. Dr. Grant nodded. She had been waiting for him to say those words. Foster left the command center. Dr. Grant followed. They moved through the corridors of station. The walls shook again as another weapon struck the shield. Foster could feel the fear in the air. Soldiers rushed past them toward the defense stations. Some of them looked at Foster. They did not say anything, but Foster could see the question in their eyes. What was happening? Why was the captain leaving the command center? The vault was deep in the station. Foster and Dr. Grant took a lift down into the depths of the structure. The deeper they went, the quieter it became. The sound of explosions faded, but Foster could still feel the tremors in the metal beneath his feet. The vault door was massive. It was made of old materials, not the advanced metals that the newer parts of the station used. It was older, more solid, more mechanical. It would not fail like the newer technology. They relied on advanced systems, but humans had learned to build things that lasted. Foster placed his hand on the door. There was a code. He had memorized it years ago. He had hoped he would never need to use it. He entered the code. The door began to open. Inside the vault, the weapon waited. It was not large. Foster had always imagined something different, something bigger, something that looked more dangerous, but the weapon was small and gray and looked almost boring. There were screens and panels around it. There were computers older than Foster himself. This technology was from the first human colonies. It was simple by modern standards, but it worked on principles that they did not understand. Was already there. He was the engineer who maintained the old systems in the station. He was a quiet man in his 60s. He had been waiting for Foster. "It is ready," said. "The charge is complete. It has been running for 3 days like I told you it would. The mechanism is sound. When you give the order, it will fire." Foster walked closer to the weapon. He could see his reflection in the polished surface of the firing mechanism. He looked like a man who was about to make a choice that would change everything. That would define everything. That would haunt him for the rest of his life. Another explosion echoed through the vault. Dust fell from the ceiling. "Shield is failing," a voice came through Foster's radio. "We have minutes, maybe less." Foster looked at Dr. Grant. He looked at. Both of them were waiting for him. Both of them knew what this meant. "When this fires," Foster said, "there is no going back." "There is no going back anyway," replied. "There is only this or nothing," began to explain how the weapon worked. His voice was calm and steady. He had explained it many times before, but Foster listened carefully. The chamber was cool and quiet. The sound of the battle above felt very far away, but Foster knew that was not true. The battle was happening above their heads right now. "The weapon operates on quantum entanglement principles," said. He was moving his hands through the air as he spoke. "Early human physicists discovered that all advanced technology relies on quantum connections. They use quantum computers to control their ships. Their weapons are guided by quantum links. Their shields are powered by quantum reactors. Everything they have is built on quantum systems." Dr. Grant was listening carefully. Her expression was serious. "The weapon targets these connections," continued. "It sends out a pulse of energy. This pulse disrupts the quantum states that hold the systems together. When you fire it, all of their technology will collapse at once, not just the ships above us. The entire fleet will be disabled." Foster moved closer to the weapon. He could see the display screens now. Green lights indicated that everything was ready. The weapon was charged. It was waiting for someone to press the trigger. "What are the consequences?" Foster asked. He already knew the answer, but he wanted to hear say it again. Was quiet for a moment. He looked at the weapon. Then he looked at Foster. "The energy pulse will spread outward in a wave," said. "It will cover a radius of approximately 5,000 kilometers. Anything with advanced quantum systems will fail. The damage will not last forever. Eventually, the quantum states will stabilize again. But for a time, the systems will simply stop working." "How long?" Dr. Grant asked. "Several hours," replied. "Maybe more, we do not know for certain. This weapon has never been fired. The calculations are based on theory, not experience." Another explosion rocked the vault. This one was much closer. Dust fell from the ceiling again. Foster could hear the sound of something breaking above them. The station was coming apart. "There is more," said quietly. "When the weapon fires, it will not only affect the technology, it will affect all advanced technology in the radius. Our newer systems will fail too. The station's modern shields will fail. The power reactors will fail. Some of our communications will fail. For several hours, station will have to rely on old mechanical systems to survive." Dr. Grant's face changed. She understood what that meant. "Our life support," she asked, "will it fail?" "The life support is mostly mechanical," said. "But the control systems are modern. They will fail. We will have to switch to backup systems. The backup systems are old. They work, but they are not efficient. They will keep people alive, but just barely." Foster listened to this. He thought about the families in the station. He thought about the people in the lower sections. They would be safe from the weapons, but they would be in darkness and cold for several hours. Some of them might not survive. Some of the elderly and the very young might die if the temperature drops too much. "There is another problem," continued. He looked unhappy about having to explain this. "The pulse will affect more than just the fleet. It will affect nearby space itself. The quantum states in the area will be unstable for some time. It could create unpredictable effects." "What kind of effects?" Foster asked. "We do not know," replied. "Space is held together by quantum forces at a fundamental level. Disrupting those forces could cause problems. The effects could spread beyond our 5,000-kilometer estimate. They could be small. They could be large. The theory suggests that it will eventually stabilize on its own, but we cannot be certain." Dr. Grant walked closer to the weapon. She looked at it like she was trying to understand something about it. Her face was troubled. "If we use this weapon," she said slowly, "we could be putting other human colonies at risk if the effects spread, if they reach inhabited worlds. Then we will have saved station but endangered others." Foster finished her thought. The three of them stood in silence. The vault shook again. Foster realized he did not have much time. The shield was failing, the fleet was breaking through. "How many people will die if we do not use the weapon?" Foster asked. He directed the question at, but he was really asking it of himself. Did not answer immediately. He did not need to. They all knew the answer. If they did not use the weapon, everyone on station would die. The few people who might escape would be hunted down and killed by the... There would be no future for humanity in this region of space. "How many children are in the lower sections?" asked quietly. 273, Foster replied. He had memorized that number long ago. Nodded slowly. "Then you know what you have to do." Foster looked at the firing mechanism. It was a simple thing, just a lever and a button, early human technology, nothing complicated, nothing fancy, just a simple trigger that controlled an enormous amount of power. "If I pull this trigger," Foster said, "I become a person who made a choice that killed innocents. Maybe now, maybe later, but I will have done it." "If you do not pull the trigger," Dr. Grant said, "you become a person who let thousands of innocents die when you had the power to save them." Foster understood. There was no good choice here. There was only the choice between two bad options. He had to choose which people would die and which would live. He had to choose which future was acceptable. "Tell me what to do," Foster said. "Walk to the weapon." He placed his hand on the firing mechanism. "When you are ready," said, "you press the button first, that arms the system. Then you pull the trigger, the weapon will fire." Foster moved to stand beside. His hand was shaking slightly. He thought about all the people he had known who had died in this war. He thought about the soldiers who had given their lives. He thought about the civilians on the colonies that had been destroyed. He thought about what it meant before Foster could press the button. The radio on his hip came alive with a voice. It was Colonel Hayes, the commander of the station's military forces. His voice was urgent. "Captain, we have an incoming communication from the flagship. Commander Vex is requesting direct contact with you. He says he has an important proposal." Foster's hand stopped. He looked at Dr. Grant. She was staring at him. "Put him through," Foster said into the radio. The communication system in the vault came to life. A face appeared on one of the old screens. It was Commander Vex. His skin was pale blue. His eyes were large and dark. He looked almost human, except for the fact that he was not human at all. They had conquered most of the galaxy, and they had never learned to see other species as equals. "Captain Foster," Vex said. His voice was calm and measured. "I am impressed by your resistance. Your species is more resilient than we calculated. You have caused us significant losses." Foster did not respond. He waited to hear what Vex wanted to say. "I am proposing that we end this conflict with honor," Vex continued. "Surrender your station. Evacuate your people peacefully. Your civilians will be transported to a designated colony world. You will be treated well. I give you my word as a commander." Foster almost laughed. He did not laugh, but he wanted to. The offer was not real. Everyone on station knew it. If they surrendered, if they gave up the station and their people that would take them, they would be prisoners or slaves or simply killed. They did not understand mercy. They did not understand kindness. They only understood power and victory. "My people have heard what happened to the colonies on Prime," Foster said. "Your words have no value to me, Commander Vex." Vex's expression did not change. "I see. Then I have only warnings for you. Captain, I sense that you are considering using a weapon of some kind, a weapon that might harm my fleet. I advise against this course of action. If you fire on my ships, there will be no negotiations. Your station will be destroyed. Every human on station will be killed. This I guarantee." The screen went dark. The communication ended. Foster looked at Dr. Grant. She was pale. Her hands were shaking. "The children," she whispered. "If we use the weapon, if it does what says it will do." "If we do not use the weapon," said quietly, "those children will all be dead within the hour. That is not a threat from that is a certainty." "But the effects of the weapon," Dr. Grant said. "If they spread beyond the radius calculated, if they reach other human worlds." The vault shook again, the lights flickered. Foster could hear the sound of tearing metal from somewhere above them. The station was being torn apart. The shield was dying. They were out of time. "We do not have a choice," Foster said. "Not really." "We always have a choice," Dr. Grant replied. Her eyes were wet with tears. "That is what makes us human. We always have the ability to choose." "Then what do you choose?" Foster asked. "Tell me, should I fire the weapon or not?" Dr. Grant did not answer. She could not answer. There was no right answer. There was only the answer that let you live with yourself afterwards. There was only the answer that let you sleep at night. Foster heard voices from above the vault. Soldiers were shouting. More explosions sounded. The fleet was breaking through the shield. They were entering the station now. They were coming inside. Foster thought about the soldiers on the upper levels. They were fighting even now. They were dying to buy him time. They were dying to give him the chance to use the weapon. He thought about all the people throughout the station who had made sacrifices. He thought about the engineers who had kept the old weapon running all these years. He thought about the scientists who had studied it and understood it. He thought about all the humans who had refused to surrender even when surrender seemed like the only option. He thought about hope. "Tell me something," Foster said to Dr. Grant. "What is the point of survival if we have to give up everything that makes us human to survive?" "We do not have to give up who we are," Dr. Grant said. "We do," Foster replied. "If we surrender to we give up our freedom, we give up our choice, we give up everything. At least if we use the weapon, we choose our own path, we choose to fight, we choose to determine our future." Foster turned back to the weapon. His hand was steady now. He was not afraid anymore. He had made his decision. "The effects might spread," said. "Other humans might be harmed." "Other humans are already being harmed," Foster replied. "Humans across the galaxy are dying right now. They are not stopping. They will not stop until all of us are gone. This weapon might give us the chance to change that." Foster looked at the button. His hand moved toward it. "Wait," Dr. Grant said. She reached out and put her hand on Foster's arm. "If you fire this weapon, you will be famous. You will be remembered. But you will also be remembered as the man who made the choice to potentially harm civilians on other worlds. You will carry that forever." "I know," Foster said. "But if I do not fire it, I will carry the memory of all these people dying. I will carry the memory of those children in the lower sections. I can choose which memory to carry. I choose the first one." Above them, the sound of fighting grew louder. They were inside the station now. Foster pressed the button. For a moment, nothing happened. The vault was silent. Foster held the trigger and waited. Then, deep beneath the vault, something began to resonate. It was a vibration that Foster could feel in his bones. It was a sound that was not really a sound, but something deeper than sound. The display screens went wild with activity. Numbers scrolled so fast that they became a blur. The resonance grew louder. The entire vault began to shake, not from explosions from above, but from the energy that the weapon was releasing below. Then there was a flash of light. It came from beneath the weapon, a blue-white energy that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. The light grew brighter. It filled the entire vault. Foster covered his eyes, but the light was so bright that it penetrated his closed eyelids. He heard Dr. Grant cry out. He heard shout something, but he could not hear the words. Then the light stopped. The vault was dark. The displays were dark. The lights that usually illuminated the weapon chamber were all dark. For a moment, Foster thought everything had failed. Then his eyes adjusted to the darkness, and he saw that it was not complete darkness. There was a faint glow coming from the equipment. The old mechanical instruments were still working. Foster opened his radio. Nothing. The radio was dead. He looked at Dr. Grant. She was sitting on the ground, her face covered in dust. Her eyes were wide with shock. "Is it finished?" she asked. "I do not know," Foster replied. Was moving toward one of the old mechanical displays. This one was powered by something other than the modern electrical systems. This one still had power. His hands moved across the dials and levers. He read the mechanical gauges carefully. "It worked," said slowly. "The weapon fired, the pulse was released." Foster felt his legs become weak. He sat down beside Dr. Grant. He realized he was shaking. "What happens now?" Dr. Grant asked. Did not answer immediately. He was reading more information from the mechanical displays. "We wait," finally said. "If the weapon did what it was supposed to do, the fleet's technology has just failed, all of it, at the same moment." Above them, the sound of fighting had stopped. There was silence. It was the strangest silence Foster had ever heard. For days there had been constant sound. The sound of alarms, the sound of explosions, the sound of weapons firing, the sound of ships attacking the station. But now there was nothing, just silence. Foster climbed to his feet. Dr. Grant stood beside him. They moved toward the vault door together. When they stepped out into the corridor, they found themselves in darkness. The lights in the station had gone out. Only the faint glow of emergency systems provided any illumination at all. The corridor was thick with dust and smoke. Ahead of them, Foster heard voices. Soldiers were moving through the darkness, confused and calling out to each other. Foster and Dr. Grant moved toward the voices. They made their way up through the station, moving slowly through the dark corridors. Everywhere they went, they found the same thing. The station was dark. The modern systems were all dead. But the station itself was intact. No new explosions were coming. No new weapon strikes were hitting the structure. When they reached the upper levels, they found Colonel Hayes standing in the command center. The command center was dark too, but through the windows, they could see something that made Foster stop in his tracks. The fleet was gone. Not destroyed, not visible as wreckage or debris, just gone. The black ships that had filled the sky above station were no longer there. In their place was nothing but empty darkness and a few faint points of light that might have been stars or might have been something else. The moment the weapon fired, Hayes said, all their systems failed, the ships lost power. Their propulsion systems stopped working. Their weapons went silent. It was like someone had switched off the entire fleet at once. Foster moved to the window. He looked out at the empty sky. "Are they all dead?" Dr. Grant asked. "I do not know," Hayes replied. "When the systems failed, the ships stopped transmitting. We have received no signals. We have seen no movement. But whether they are dead or simply drifting in the dark, I cannot say." Foster realized something. He turned back to look at Hayes. "What is the status of station?" Foster asked. "Life support is running on backup systems," Hayes replied. "We are on emergency power only. It is working, but barely. The temperature in the lower sections is already dropping. We need to restore the main systems or people will start to freeze." Foster understood. The weapon had worked. It had disabled the fleet, but it had also disabled most of the station's modern systems. The choice was clear. They had chosen to live by accepting that they would suffer for a time. They had chosen survival, and now they would have to deal with the consequences. "Get work crews to the main power reactors," Foster ordered. "We need to get the mechanical backups running. We need to restore life support." Hayes nodded and moved to carry out the orders. He used runners to deliver messages since the radio systems were dead. Foster looked back out at the empty sky. He thought about Commander Vex. He thought about the fleet out there somewhere in the darkness, their ships drifting without power or life support. He thought about what he had done. A voice came through a mechanical speaker. It was one of the old systems that did not require modern technology to operate. The voice was distorted and angry. "Humans," the voice said. It was Commander Vex. "You have attacked us. You have used a weapon against the fleet. This is an act of war. This is an act of barbarism from a primitive species. But I acknowledge your strength. You will not be forgotten. When my empire rebuilds, when my people recover, we will return. And we will make sure that every human in this galaxy understands the price of attacking us." Station had been restored. The main power systems were working again. Life support was functioning normally. The debris that had accumulated during the battle had been cleared away. The station looked almost like it had before the attack, except for the scars on its outer hull. Those scars would take much longer to repair. Foster stood on the observation deck and looked out at the stars. It was his habit now. He came here every evening to think about what had happened and what came next. The view from the observation deck was clear and beautiful. The stars stretched out in every direction, and Foster could see the vast emptiness of space beyond them. Dr. Grant found him there. She always did. "There are representatives waiting in the conference room," she said. "They arrived this morning." Foster nodded. He turned away from the window and followed her down the corridor. The representatives were from dozens of alien species. There were beings that looked almost human and beings that looked like nothing Foster had ever seen before. They had come from across the galaxy to meet with the humans of station. They had come because the news of what Foster had done had spread throughout the galaxy. The news that a primitive human species had defeated the mighty empire. Foster entered the conference room. All of the representatives turned to look at him. Some of their eyes showed respect. Some showed fear. Some showed something that Foster could not identify. "Captain Foster," a representative from the said. They were a species that had been enslaved by for nearly 100 years. "We have heard of your victory. We have heard that you used a weapon to defeat the fleet. We have heard that this weapon was more powerful than anything the possessed." "The weapon was not more powerful," Foster replied. He sat at the head of the table. "They had superior firepower. What we had was different. We had a weapon that they did not expect. We had knowledge of physics that they had forgotten or never understood." "Knowledge that your species created," another representative said. This one was from the Collective, a species that had long maintained neutrality in galactic affairs. "This weapon, it changed everything. The Empire is no longer the dominant power in this region of space. Many worlds have begun to rebel. Many species are reconsidering their treaties and alliances." Foster listened to this. He understood what was happening. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted, because of one weapon, because of one choice that he had made. "There are other matters," Dr. Grant said. She was standing beside Foster. "The weapon's effects are still spreading. We have received reports from human colonies and from other worlds. Some of the effects are beneficial. Quantum interference is creating unusual phenomena that are helping with certain types of research. But there are also reports of problems." Foster looked at her. He had been waiting for her to say this. "What kind of problems?" he asked. "On the outer colonies, there have been instabilities," Dr. Grant replied. "Unusual weather patterns. Some colonies are experiencing unseasonable cold. Some are experiencing unusual gravitational anomalies. We believe these are consequences of the weapon's effects spreading further than calculated." An old walked into the conference room. Everyone stopped talking immediately. There was one of a small group that had survived the weapon's effects. His ship had been far enough from the main fleet that it had not been completely disabled. They had been drifting in space for weeks before being found. The representatives looked uneasy. They had never expected to see her in a meeting like this. They had certainly never expected to see her in a peaceful setting at station. "I am called," they said. His voice was calm and even. "I come from the fleet of Commander Vex. I come to speak for those who have decided that the old way is no longer possible. We have been defeated. We have been shown that our technology is not invulnerable. We have been shown that we are not destined to rule the galaxy." Foster watched carefully. He did not trust him, but he listened to what he had to say. "My people made a choice to attack you," continued. "We believed that you were beneath us. We believed that victory was certain. We were wrong. Now we must decide whether to continue on the path that has failed us or whether to find a different way." "What way is that?" Foster asked. "The way of coexistence," replied. "The way of negotiation. The way of understanding that other species have value. We have much to learn from humans, your resilience, your creativity, your ability to survive against impossible odds." Some of the representatives seemed skeptical, but Foster could see that many of them were considering what they had said. "I will not lie to you," Foster said, speaking to all of the representatives. "I made a choice to use a weapon that I knew would cause suffering. I knew that it might harm innocent people. I did it anyway because I believed it was the only way to save my people. I do not regret that choice, but I understand that it has consequences that extend far beyond what I intended." Foster stood up and walked to the window that showed the stars beyond the station. "Humanity has survived," he said. "We have been given a future, but we cannot use that future to cause more suffering. We cannot use our victory as a reason to dominate others. If we do that, then we become we become the thing that we fought against." He turned back to face the representatives. "I propose that we form an alliance," Foster said. "Not an alliance based on fear or power, but an alliance based on the idea that all species have value. All species deserve the right to determine their own future. The Empire tried to take that away from us. We will not do the same to others." The representatives were quiet for a long time. Then the representative spoke. "We accept this proposal," they said. "We have suffered under rule for 100 years. We are ready for a new way." One by one, the other representatives agreed. They agreed to form an alliance with humanity. They agreed to work toward a galaxy where power was shared and where conquest was not the way of things. Later that day, Foster returned to the observation deck. Dr. Grant joined him there again. "You did well in the conference," she said. "I gave them hope," Foster replied. "Whether that hope is justified remains to be seen." They stood in silence for a time, looking out at the stars. "Do you regret pulling the trigger?" Dr. Grant asked. Foster thought about this question carefully. He thought about the fleet that had been disabled. He thought about the potential effects spreading through space. He thought about the consequences that were still unfolding across the galaxy. He thought about the future that humanity now had. "No," Foster said finally. "I do not regret it, but I will carry the weight of it for the rest of my life. That is the price of leadership. That is the price of making choices that no one else can make." Dr. Grant nodded. She understood. They stood together on the observation deck, watching the stars. The stars that humans would now have to learn to navigate differently. The stars that now held different dangers and different possibilities. Foster thought about the trigger he had pulled. He thought about how one moment, one decision, one action had changed everything. Not just for Station, but for the entire galaxy. He thought about what it meant to be human. It meant being willing to fight when fighting seemed impossible. It meant being willing to make hard choices when no good choices existed. It meant being willing to change your life forever in order to save others. The stars continued to shine above them, beautiful and indifferent to the struggles of the beings below. But Foster knew that those struggles mattered. He knew that every choice, no matter how difficult, helped to shape the future. He had pulled the trigger and saved his people. He would have to live with that choice forever. But at least they would live. That was enough. That had to be enough. The voice stopped. The speaker went silent. Foster stood at the window and looked out at the dark sky. He had won. He had saved Station. He had saved the people who lived there, but he had also made enemies that would not forget. He had shown the galaxy that humans could fight back. He had shown them that humans were not prey. He had also shown them something else. He had shown them that humans would do whatever was necessary to survive, that humans would use weapons that others feared to use, that humans would make choices that others could not make. Foster did not know if that was a good thing or a bad thing. He only knew that he had pulled the trigger and the weapon had fired. Everything had changed in an instant. The night sky above Station was finally peaceful, but Foster knew that peace would not last long. The weapon armed, the display screens changed. Numbers began to scroll across them. The weapon was preparing to fire. Dr. Grant closed her eyes, stood beside Foster watching the screens. "There is no going back now," said. "There never was," Foster replied. Foster's hand moved to the trigger, his fingers wrapped around it. He could feel the cold metal against his skin. This was the moment. This was the last moment before everything changed forever. The vault shook one more time. Foster pulled the trigger. Oh, be human. He thought about hope and survival and the future. Outside the vault, Station shook as another weapon strike hit the failing shield. Foster's hand moved toward the button. Foster took a step toward the firing mechanism. His hand moved slowly. His fingers touched the cold metal of the trigger. The vault shook again. Foster could hear the sound of the station being torn apart above them. He thought about the children. He thought about all the humans who had refused to give up. He thought about all the worlds that they had taken. He thought about his own life, about what it meant to be human. It meant refusing to accept the darkness. It meant choosing to fight even when the odds were impossible. Foster's hand tightened on the trigger. This was the moment. This was the last moment before everything changed forever.